We have at least 15 minutes for panel discussion now. We've lost some of our panelists. I think we've lost Doctors Warren, Ginelli, and Fogarty, but we still have Paul Camoon. Ian is here. Marsh is here. Shauna is here. Of course, Dr. Prokopov, Jim, and Egbert. So we have some questions in Q&A that haven't been answered yet. I think one we had was for Dr. Fogarty, so that's not going to be useful. Question for Dr. Pandya. Do you agree with Dr. Zubrin's statement, that's Bob Zubrin, the Mars Society, that the first pioneering species on Mars is going to be a branch in human evolution? Why or why not? She may or may not be here. She's still logged in, but she was in the, she actually is working in the ER as she was doing this, so she might not be available. I'm going to ask a broader question, I guess, and in the context of my opening remarks. We are going to see, I think, a vast increase in the number of humans that go into space in the next few years. If Starship flies, or when Starship flies, we used to have an expression, when my ship comes in. Well, now we have the expression for all the space enthusiasts, when Starship flies, because it's going to change a lot of things. It's going to make things a lot more affordable. And we probably will be able to build gravity labs, but we're going to have much more data coming in. And how are there ideas that people have about how we might harvest that? How are we going to incent these people who are going for their own reasons with their own money to somehow be test subjects? Does anyone have thoughts on that?
Well, Rand, I would say it's the normal human motivations that have gotten people to do anything throughout history. And most of it is around either commercial.
You pay them or you punish them, right?
Well, exactly. Fear and greed are the two drivers. And the main, let's say the first level of motivation that is focused around capital gain is probably around land. So land is settlement to a great extent. So it comes down, it's very interesting because I think the aspirational drivers of, say, people around this conversation as early adopters and innovators is to push for the expansion of human civilization. Not to abandon Earth by any means, but to expand beyond Earth. The motivation of the early and late majorities, those who don't care about the ideals and principles, are to generate increased capital and wealth and resource concentration by the acquisition of land and assets and other resources. And it's actually, I think, one of the factors of the growth of market-based economics is that both the aspirational drivers of the early adopters and the financial and resource drivers of the early and late majority both align synergistically to open up that frontier.
Well, I guess I was asking a more mundane question, like, should NASA, for example, offer subsidies to these space companies that are taking people into space to maybe reduce ticket prices for people who want to offer their medical data?
Rand, I think there's a couple ways to get people to share their medical data. Some people wish to share their medical data, feel like they're contributing to the greater good, the greater research. You could pay people to do it. You've got the opportunity for some people to participate as volunteers at research studies. So it may be that which is one of the ways I got on the vomit comment back in the early days, is I agreed to be an experimental subject. So I traded my medical data for a flight. So I think that's one way to get it. So I do think is that motivation. There's a fair amount of market forces at work. If, for example, a pharmaceutical development company needs to have enough data on the effect of whatever medication on somebody in space, they're going to pony up enough money to fly those people. And that comes down to more of an economic question. You know, is it economically feasible? I've looked at some things. It's not currently feasible to do a study that has enough power to demonstrate function at the prices that like a suborbital flight are going. If you need to fly 100 people, you know, that's prohibitively expensive to get that data. But if you just need like a proof of concept, you know, that's something that can get worked out. The question about whether NASA should be funding this, I think it depends on what the question is. And so there's going to be a lot of a political weight behind a lot of that. For example, the discussion about in vitro fertilization and development is probably such a hot topic that I don't think the national space agencies are going to fund that just because it can be politically polarizing. So to summarize it up, I think, there's different motivations and what you want to incentivize depends on what outcome you're looking to get from the research.
Well, I'm just thinking about in the context, if you have a bunch of people going up there to a space resort.
Rand,
how can we use that?
I think it's more fundamental. The very nature of medicine in the coming years may be so data driven that it's almost a prerequisite of entering space to provide a full medical transparency of your genome and other aspects, simply because the evolution of space medicine will be such a personalized medical field.
I feel that we're going to learn a lot by the happy accidents and just the study of the changes that people get, because what's going to happen is there are going to be some people who are going to have injuries, accidents, or develop some sort of occupationally related issue. They're going to present for medical evaluation, and then we will recognize that. A lot of medicine has progressed over the years. Everything from chemotherapy was a happy accident by recognizing that soldiers exposed to mustard gas in World War I had their cancers cured, to learning that like different chemicals cause different effects on the body. I think we're going to discover positive things and some negative things just by having large numbers of people exposed. And if they have issues or happy accidents, the study of them will advance science as we move forward.
I guess that would be similar to the discovery of antibiotics, in Civil War battlefields, right? When they saw glowing wounds.
Yeah.
And there are big, so it's not just going to be vacationers. I mean, there are people going to be there, going to probably be construction workers up there, and there probably will be accidents.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, it may well be that a lot of the learnings, that emerge out of medical insights in space will be due to the failures of not being able to save people, the medical deterioration of some people, even to the point of death. So I think that there will be there may well be a significant loss of life. A little bit to Marshall's point. Part of those happy accidents may also be unfortunate accidents and events and anomalies, through which a great deal of learning and data will emerge as well, hopefully for the benefit of subsequent settlers.
Well, yeah, and as I point out in my book, every one of the FAA regulations that certify, we have modern certified aircraft now, those are written in blood. And that's, it's unrealistic to think that we're going to be sending people out into space and en masse and not lose people. Yeah. But it will be a learning experience. There's some.
Most people, I think most people going to space will sign clear indemnities that They're willing to take the risk, and they're willing to have, it may well potentially be either a requirement or a standard or a best practice, that you're also willing to subject your cadaver to the greatest medical scrutiny possible.
Certainly give the people informed consent.
Yes.
I think I wouldn't want to be one of the first or second batch on the Starship.
Well, I think that Elon plans to have a lot of cargo flights with Starship before he puts people on.
Mhm.
Here's a question, because we've talked a lot about the correlation between aging, diseases, and space. Somebody's asking, is there a relationship between space and diabetes and cardiovascular CVD here on Earth specifically?
Yes, but it's not direct. So it as one of the speakers said, there is some accelerated aging. There's definitely cardiovascular changes, but they don't exactly correlate with, for example, heart attacks. Your heart does, in some ways, become weaker in space in microgravity and prolonged, and so you get orthostatic hypotension when you come back to Earth. We have learned a lot from osteoporosis studies in astronauts. The endocrine system is altered. Some of the diabetic advances actually for micromineralization are indirectly related to space flight. But basically, I am not aware of a diabetic that's flown into space. So I will basically say that that has not been studied directly. And that's going to be one of the opportunities when we fly people with diabetes, advanced cardiovascular heart disease into space, I think will be beneficial. The biggest risk for someone with advanced cardiovascular disease flying to space is not actually the microgravity, it's actually acceleration during launch and reentry.
Right.
And one of the things that you're going to see is, I personally think that certain people, like with congestive heart failure, may do much better in a microgravity environment. So, I think there would be potential for, example, a orbital hospital where certain medical conditions, the Lee syndrome would be an obvious one, but, would do much better in the space environment. What exactly all those are, I don't think we've quite teased out yet. We're just on the edge of this great era of discovery where we're going to have much more people in space.
Yeah, well, we're coming up on the end of our time. So unless, I don't know whether we can extend or not. But if not, I think that's kind of the way I started, was talk about what we're going to be learning when all these people go into space. And that's probably going to be a good way to end up on. We're going to learn, I say, we're not going to be sending these weirdos, these astronauts, into space anymore. We're going to be sending normal, everyday people. And we're going to learn a lot more, because science, the space is not going to be settled, by these superhumans. It's going to be, they're going to be young men and women going out there and building new lives. And we're going to learn a lot when that happens, I think. So with that, I think we'll wrap up unless somebody else has any final comments.
I just my only comment is I think the transport systems this decade and other supporting technologies are going to allow us to push out into the inner solar system before mid-century en masse with thousands of people. And we have to have the cultural robustness to accept new forms of medical practice, surgery, death in space, hardship, but great opportunity, great inspiration, great hope, and ultimately the expansion of civilization out into the solar system, into the stars. It's not going to be an easy road. It's going to be a rough road. We need to regain our grit of frontier mentality and be prepared to absorb the risks and to realize their rewards.
Yeah. And as I said, I wrote a book about that. So I want to thank all the panelists. I think it was a very interesting discussion, exceeded my expectations, including the panelists who had to leave us early. And till the next time.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks for inviting us.
Awesome conference.
It was a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to contribute. Thank you.
Can we have a group picture?
Take your round.
Well, it's recorded. Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, thanks.